Hello and welcome to another online class with Shiro Kashi Aikido. In today's class, we'll be looking at some exercises to develop the 4th and 5th Ken Suburi, which should help you when you come to practice partnered exercises such as Awase and Kumitachi. Before we start, let's take a look at the setup we'll be using. I've created a target area that I'll be focusing on when completing the exercises, and standing in Ken Kamai with the tip of my Ken over the area I'll be striking, I've marked one line in front of the toes on my right foot and a second line behind my back foot. We'll be using these lines as we work through the video. Okay, let's look at exercise 1. In exercise 1, we'll be looking at the first cut from the 4th Ken Suburi. So standing on line 2, we'll raise the Ken, begin the cut, lunge forward, and finish with your right foot on line 1. Your hanmi should be such that you'll be finishing with your back foot on line 2. If your toes go slightly over the line, that's not a problem, but try to aim to get them as close to the line as you can. When you're cutting, make sure your Ken is in front of your body. Don't raise the Ken, push your body forward, and then cut afterwards. This is bad form. So here, the Ken is behind me. I've already attacked, I've already advanced, and I'm opening myself up to being struck from a partner. So when I cut, I make sure I raise. The Ken begins its cut as I step forward, and I'm cutting on a straight line. In exercise 2, we'll continue with the 4th Ken Suburi. So making the straight cut. But now we're going to work on the leg movement. So we're going to step back slightly to give ourselves a bigger distance to cover. We're going to keep the same basics in our mind as we're making the cut. So the Ken always travels in front of the body, but we've got to cover a little bit more distance this time. This is where the lines on the floor are really going to help us see if we're reaching the distance we need to get to. We'll see if our hanmi changes slightly or if we're doing the same move every time. So if you can step back slightly from the line and produce the same cut 3 times in a row, then move back a little bit further. And we're going to keep pushing that back as far as we can to see how much space we can cover. So here we're finding it quite comfortable to cover the distance. So I'm going to slide it back a little bit further. Still stepping over the line. This time my hand is becoming a little bit narrow as I'm covering more distance. And this is quite usual. Your feet will start to come together as you land. So even if we don't quite reach it, we've got the lines on the mat so we can see how far we've got, and then we can work on that. So we can get a little bit closer to the target every time. There we go, and this time we managed to get it back over the line and cut in the right place. In exercise 3, we're going to change hanmi. So from right hanmi, we're moving to left hanmi, make sure we're keeping the right shoulder back. And we make 3 cuts, just doing our normal first cut. Obviously not used to doing this cut from the 4th Suburi, so this could be something new. You might need to practice a little bit. But after we've done the big push off the second exercise, you should find the foot movement very simple. So once you do come comfortable with this, you can then start to step back as we did in exercise 2. So again, we're going to be pushing back off that right leg, covering greater distance and striking at our target area. And again, once you become comfortable and you can repeat the cut 3 times from the same distance, stretch that distance, push yourself back a little bit further. Covering distance when you're training with a partner is one of the hardest things to build up. It can become quite frustrating when you are training with a partner and you can't quite reach them all the time. So this kind of practice will help you develop your strength in your legs, also the balance when you're landing as well. So it can't be stressed enough how important solo practice such as this is to your overall weapons techniques. And moving on to exercise 4, we'll now change and look at the first move from the 5th Ken Suburi. So beginning in right hanmi, we open our foot to the right, the Ken drops to the right, goes behind the back, step forward and strike, moving slightly offline, which is slightly different to the normal Suburi move where you'd go in on a straight line. Because we're building up towards partner practices, we're going to move off slightly to the left to move around an attacking blade. So the basic moves: open your right foot, drop the Ken, raise it high above your head and behind your back, and then start the Ken cut before your body starts to move, and then follow it up with the body movement afterwards. So open behind the back, turning the body, cutting, and then following through. And again, we're aiming to get that new front foot finishing on line 1. And that way you know that the Ken tip's going to be over your target area. Okay, let's move on to exercise 5. Exercise 5 is taking that opening move from the 5th Ken Suburi and stretching the distance that we're attacking over. So our first move is our standard 5th Suburi first move, so we can get the measure in. And then we're going to slide back maybe 10-12 centimeters and cover that distance. And you should find that it's quite comfortable to cover that distance, so you should be able to do that. If you do that 3 times in a run without any major problems, you'll quickly be able to move on to covering a greater distance. So there's no major problem there. So we're going to draw back again, probably about the same distance, and see how we can cope with that one. You'll find that it's going to be much easier than when you're practicing the 4th Suburi. That big step forward from the back leg enables you to cover a lot more distance than when you're lunging forward with a 4th Suburi cut. Make sure that as you're covering greater distance, it's not affecting your form of your body. When you're finishing your cut, you're still in left hammy and your right shoulder is being pulled back. You're not reaching forward with your right arm trying to get over the target area. And you'll see this time I'm able to go right back to the edge of my training area. And it's not really pushing me too much. So if I had a bigger training area, I could probably try and go a little bit further and really try to develop my attacking moves. And moving on to exercise 6, we'll continue with the 5th Ken Suburi opening move, but this time from left hand me, moving into right hand me. So just the basic practice to start with, and you'll see here from this angle how I'm moving off to the right. I'm moving off the line of the attack, so an attacking blade or an attacking ski would go past me, and I'll be moving around it. I've got to remember all the basic moves that I would on my regular Suburi, even though I am moving offline. So as I begin the move, I open my foot and I drop the Ken to the side before dropping it behind my back. And again, the Ken is moving in front of my body as I begin the cut. Practice it slowly. Make sure everything is correct with your timing. And then once you get comfortable with that, you can start to become smoother and make it more of an all-one movement. And now on to exercise 7. Of course, if you've been paying attention, you'll have pretty much figured out what exercise 7 is going to be. Starting in left hand me, we're going to make a cut moving in with our right foot. But of course, this time we're going to stretch that distance. We're going to start to move backwards. So we'll do 3 exercises from approximately 10 centimeters further back from our start position. And if we can comfortably reach the target area from here, then we're going to start extending it back. If you go back each time, maybe 10 centimeters, if you find that a little bit hard, perhaps just make it 5 centimeters or so. But see how far you can reasonably get and still get over the target area you cut. And return back to this exercise. Don't just do it once. Come back to it in a few weeks' time or a few months' time and see how you've progressed. Hopefully you haven't receded at all. Hopefully you've only improved. And again, you should find that you can get a lot more of the cover when you're making this 5th Ken Suburi attack than you would with the 4th. And it's good practice to make sure you are practicing on the left side and the right side as well. So you don't need to go to the extremes of marking out the floor with tape, as I've done in the example for the video. But if you can just make some markings on the floor that aren't going to get in the way, you're not going to trip up over, you'll be able to measure your distance quite easily. So in exercise 8, we don't need a Ken. So this is just a body technique exercise, but it's taking the movements that we've learnt in the previous exercises and putting them into body technique. So in exercise 8, we're going to use the movement from the 4th Ken Suburi, just that lunge forward, in this case in right hand knee. And we're going to build the exercises together. So once I've made that first move from line 1, once I've done it 3 times consistently, I'm going to start to stretch my distance 10 centimeters each time and just get used to ireming or entering forward in a direct line. This time I am going straight forward. After you've been training with a Ken, you'll probably find this a lot easier, not having the weapon in your hand. So after you've exercised on the right side, we're going to switch and we're going to train on the left side now. And again, exactly the same, 3 times each before moving back and increasing your distance. Try and maintain the focus on your target area that you did when you had the Ken and you were cutting. Imagine that is your opponent, that is your partner that you're training with, and you are entering towards them. You might recognize the move from some techniques, such as Iramanagi and others. But if you can link the movements you're doing in your taijutsu to the movements you're doing in your weapons, you'll find training a lot easier. It'll all become one. As I'm practicing these exercises, whether it's with a Ken or without the Ken, just in the body techniques as we're doing in this exercise, I try to keep my head level as I'm going forwards. So it's impossible for your head to stay completely level. It will dip slightly, but if you can minimize the amount that your body dips, that you drop, all the better. And now moving on to our final exercise for today. Returning to the movement from the 5th Suburi, we're going to start in right hand me, step forward into left hand me. This time we're going to move offline. So in this case, I'm moving from right hand me into left hand me, moving off slightly to the left. I'm only going to show the video on one side for this exercise, but obviously please start with your right foot forward sometimes, also practice with your left foot forward. And again, once you can cover a distance consecutively, maybe 3 or 4 times on the run with no major issues, start stretching that distance, go further back each time. When you're practicing any of these exercises, be mindful of the ground conditions. I'm fortunate that I have a mat to train on, so there's very little chance of me slipping. But whenever I'm trying to develop the gait or the distance of my travel, then I'm going to be putting a lot of pressure down into my back leg, and there is a chance of slipping. So if I'm on gravel, I'd be very wary. Also, if I was on grass, there's a chance that if it was slightly damp, it could be slippy. Also, if I was training inside, the floor might be a solid floor, it could be polished, and again, I could slip, I could pull a muscle, I could injure myself. So I'm always mindful, and then you should make sure that you wear the appropriate footwear as well. So maybe something with a rubber sole might be better if it was slightly damp, and that would limit the chance of you getting injured. We've now reached the end of another online class. I hope you enjoyed this one. I look forward to seeing you next time.